The Florida sun over the Magic Kingdom didn't feel warm anymore. When the humid morning light hit my skin, it didn't register as heat. It felt like high wattage spotlight baking the surface of cheap, unyielding PVC. My alarm went off at 5 a.m. on the dot, a piercing digital chime that shattered the silence of my apartment. But I didn't open my eyes. My body did it for me. I was a prisoner behind my own retinas, a detached observer sitting deep in the dark recesses of my own skull. I watched as my hands, stiff, pale, and moving, with a terrifying calculated precision, reached down and silenced the phone. My fingers moved like independent organisms, threading the buttons of my blue park polo through the fabric loops, with the rapid, rhythmic clack, clack, clack of an old typewriter. When I looked into the bathroom mirror, a wave of absolute horror crashed against my conscious mind. I wanted to scream, to smash the glass, to claw at my face, but my vocal cords refused to vibrate. My reflection looked exactly the same 27-year-old technician, the same wired-rimmed glasses resting on my nose. But my pupils were completely blown out, swallowing the irises whole, reflecting the harsh, fluorescent bulb like two pools of stagnant, bottomless water. Smile, a wet, layered whisper echoed in the back of my brain. It wasn't a sound entering my ears. It was a thought forced into my mind, heavy and vibrating with a chorus of voices. The muscles in my face violently yanked upward. It was too wide, a grotesque plastic grin that pulled my lips so tight they threatened to split, exposing too many teeth. Adjusting, the whisper hissed, the corners of my mouth dropping slightly, easing into a polite, sanitized corporate expression. It was the perfect, vacant Disney smile. The entity wasn't just hiding inside Ursula's grotto anymore. It had realized that a static animatronic was a cage, limited by the track and the structural steel. It needed a scout. The seventh tentacle had woven its microscopic, pale fibers directly into my central nervous system, transforming me into a living meat puppet. I was a mobile antenna walking the upper world, so the biomass could study humanity, mapping our gestures, our canvases, and our camouflage. I walked through the cast member turnstiles at 7:30 a.m. The air smelled of caramelized sugar, fresh popcorn, and damp pavement. The artificial perfume of the happiest place on earth. My coordinator, Dave, waved at me from the near break room. "Hey, glad you're back," Dave said, leaning against a golf cart. Maintenance log said Ursula had a localized hydraulic leak last night, but she's cycling fine today. What'd you do to fix her? My jaw unhinged, moving with that subtle, terrible click snap in my neck. "I gave her what she was looking for," my voice said. The tone was undeniably mine, but the cadence was flat, uncanny, mechanical. Dave chuckled, shaking his head. He thought it was just the typical, exhausted dark humor of a third shift tech. "Right on. Well, get yourself down to the utilidors. We need a diagnostic run on the clamshell auto animatronics before rope drop." As I turned and walked toward the heavy subterranean tunnel entrance, I looked down at my feet. The morning sun was casting a long, sharp shadow against the bright concrete walkway. My arms were pinned straight down at my sides, but in the dark silhouette on the pavement, a thick, pale shadow of a seventh limb was slowly uncoiling from my waist, brushing invisibly against the pristine park landscaping. The entity believed it owned me completely. It thought I was entirely suppressed beneath its collective will. But in grafting its alien nervous system into my human brain, it had made a critical, fundamental error. A connection always goes both ways. And as I stepped down into the dark, echoing tunnels of the utilidors, I realized I could feel its heart beating, too. By noon, the park was a roaring, suffocating sea of tourists. The Florida heat outside was oppressive, but inside the grotto, the air felt like a crypt. Refrigerated, damp, and smelling faintly of stagnant pool water and ozone. I was stationed inside the ride's control booth, a cramped, darkened room elevated just above the loading platform. Through the glass window, I watched a continuous loop of purple clamshell vehicles glide along the submerged track. The guests were inside laughing, taking photos, completely oblivious to the fact that the coarse, dark carpet beneath their sneakers wasn't commercial nylon. It was hair, thick woven mats of it, pulsing with a faint, imperceptible warmth every time a vehicle completed a circuit. Every time a guest sat down, a sharp, white-hot jolt of static flared behind my eyes. Because the entity was wired into my brain, I could feel what it felt. Through the carpet, through the steel frame, the biomass was tasting them. It was auditing their heartbeats, absorbing their excitement, and drinking in the subtle undercurrent of instinctual fear that every child felt when staring into the ride's dark corners. But the entity made a mistake. It was so deeply intoxicated by the influx of energy from the midday crowds that its grip on my cognitive functions loosened just a fraction. It was distracted. I looked at the primary maintenance terminal in front of me. My hands were still resting on the plastic console, forced into a resting position by the parasitic nerves coiled around my spine. But I gathered every ounce of my remaining willpower, forcing my left hand to twitch. "Fight it," I screamed at myself from the back of my mind. "Just one keystroke." I bit down on the inside of my cheek until the metallic taste of blood filled my mouth. The sudden spike of human pain acted like a short circuit in the neural link. For exactly 3 seconds, my left arm belonged to me again. I slammed my fingers onto the mechanical keyboard, bypassing the standard Disney diagnostic software and forcing a command line into the park's older, unindexed intranet. I had memorized the directory path from Miller's frantic handwritten notes before he disappeared. SYS log redacted 12B EXT server 4 user access Miller K deceased/terminated loading archival files. The monitor flickered violently, the standard colorful user interface collapsing into lines of low-resolution monochrome green text. Internal corporate emails from the early 2000s began to scroll across my screen. From WDW Facilities Safety to Executive VP Operations. Subject, RE, an anomalous mass in Production Bay 4. We have completed the weight audit on the Ursula figure. The animatronic structural frame is showing an unexplained increase of 42.5 pounds per month. X-ray scans of the lower torso do not show mechanical components or fluid buildup. The density is consistent with organic tissue. Recommendation, immediate quarantine, and ride disassembly. The next email was dated just 3 days later. Subject, RE Production Bay 4. The recommendation for quarantine has been denied by corporate legal. Disassembly during peak season will negatively impact quarterly stock evaluations. The weight variance has been redacted from official logs. Assign a single technician to the night shift to manually grease the track. Do not allow external contractors near the bay. They knew. They had known for over 20 years. They didn't care that something was growing inside the ride. They just wrapped it in purple plastic and turned it into a tourist attraction to save their profit margins. I scrolled down further, my hand trembling, as the entity began to realize what I was doing. The final file was a direct text entry left by Miller, dated the night before I took over his shift. If anyone finds this text, I'm already gone. I didn't retire. I didn't leave the state. I'm part of the Grotto's foundations now. The Seventh Tentacle is highly adaptive. It's trying to merge with the park's automated systems to find a way out of the water. But I left a back door open. I hardwired an override macro into sub-basement 3 terminal 4. It's connected directly to the primary cryogenic line for the park's industrial freezers. If you get infected, you have to break the connection. You have to freeze the core. Don't let her keep singing. Suddenly, the green text on the screen dissolved into a chaotic mess of corrupted code. Behind my eyes, a deafening explosion of digital static tore through my brain. The internal connection didn't just vibrate, it roared. Treason, the choir screamed inside my head. It wasn't one voice anymore, it was Miller. It was the missing coordinators. It was a dozen cast members who had gone on leave over the decades, all screaming in a horrific, overlapping harmony that threatened to crack my skull open from the inside. The control booth monitors short-circuited, sparks flying from the casings as every screen filled with the image of a milky, unblinking eye. Outside the glass window, a deep mechanical groan echoed through the grotto. Every single clamshell vehicle on the track abruptly slammed into a halt. The whimsical carnival music distorted, slowing down until it became a low, guttural drone, and the bright show lights cut out completely, plunging the entire attraction into a terrifying emergency purple twilight. The sudden emergency blackout plunged on the grotto into a sickening subterranean twilight. The only illumination came from the pulsing neon purple safety lights hidden beneath the artificial rockwork, casting long, jagged shadows across the stagnant water. Over the emergency public address system, the pre-recorded safety loop kicked in, its cheerful corporate tone completely detached from the spreading panic. Please remain seated in your vehicle. Your ride has been temporarily delayed. But the guests weren't listening. Below the control booth, families were trapped in 50 stagnant clamshells, staring in sheer confusion and then absolute terror as the ride's primary animatronic began to violently malfunction. The massive Ursula figure didn't sway on her standard hydraulic loop anymore. Her heavy torso was twisting and jerking in erratic bone-snapping angles. The synthetic purple skin along her ribcage was splitting apart, tearing like wet paper under immense internal pressure. From the ruptures, a thick, translucent, vein-choked column of pale flesh began to spill out, forcing its way into the open air. Inside my head, a vicious psychological war broke out. The entity was furious. It flooded my brain with a wave of agonizing sensory overload, trying to completely paralyze my conscious mind. I was hit with phantom sensations of drowning in cold mud, of thick, oily fluids filling my lungs, and my bones beginning to slowly ground down to fit inside a hollow steel skeleton. Yield to the chorus, the collective consciousness boomed, a deafening cascade of a dozen stolen souls vibrating through my skull. You are the new voice. Choose your name tag, open the bay. No, I gasped out loud. I fought for my own throat, forcing my vocal cords to tear away from its control. A thin, dark line of unhuman blackish fluid leaked from the corner of my mouth, where the parasitic fibers had begun to fuse with my salivary glands. The entity was trying to use me to override the ride's safety blocks and lock the guests inside the grotto forever. It wanted a mass harvest. My resistance was throwing the entire collective mind into a chaotic discord. Because I wouldn't submit, the entity's physical manifestation in the water was losing its perfect camouflage. I forced my stiff, unyielding right leg forward, then my left. I didn't walk. I lurched out of the control booth, crashing through the door and stumbling onto the narrow metal maintenance catwalk that hung over the ride track. Below me, a child screamed. The massive, pale seventh tentacle had fully uncoiled from Ursula's ruined torso. It stretched 50 feet across the flood lagoon, its fleshy knuckles opening like sores to reveal hundreds of weeping, milky white eyes. It slammed against the side of a clamshell vehicle, the impact rocking the fiberglass boat violently. Tourists began scrambling over the sides, splashing into the waist-deep, oily water of the track, running blindly toward the emergency exits. To the terrified families looking up, I must have looked like a monster. I was stumbling along the catwalk, my uniform stained with black fluid, my neck snapping back and forth with a horrific mechanical hitch, fighting my own limbs for every single inch of movement. "Down!" the choir roared, paralyzing my right arm and slamming it hard against the metal safety railing. "Down to the pit! Merge!" "We're going down," I choked out, using my left hand to physically wrench my right arm free from the railing. "But we're going to the basement." With a final desperate surge of human adrenaline, I threw my weight forward, deliberately tumbling off the end of the maintenance catwalk. I crashed hard onto the concrete floor near a hidden utility exit, my right shoulder dislocating with a sickening pop. But I couldn't feel the pain. The entity's freezing, numbing essence had completely deadened my nerves. I dragged my broken body across the floor, reaching out with my one functional hand to grip the hand of the heavy, rusted iron door marked Sub-Basement 3, authorized personnel only. The iron door groaned on its rusted hinges as I slammed it shut behind me, locking out the distant, echoing screams of the panicked tourists up on the ride track. I fell down the steep concrete steps, tumbling directly into the dark, stagnant water of Sub-Basement 3. The water here was waist deep, freezing and choked with black sludge. The air was so thick, with the stench of copper, rotting organic tissue, and heavy machinery, that my lungs practically rejected it. I scrambled to my feet, my dislocated right arm hanging completely useless at my side, my boots sloshing through the thick mire. The entity's hold on the physical space down here was absolute. The walls were no longer concrete and brick. They were coated in a thick, pulsating web of translucent, pale veins that stretched across the ceiling like a canopy of rotten vines. The entire underground infrastructure of the ride was alive, breathing, twitching, and radiating a low, wet, rhythmic hum that vibrated straight through my skull. "You cannot untie the knot," the choir boomed inside my mind. The voice is now furious and desperate. "We are the network, we are the water, we are the name tags and the grease." "Shut up," I hissed, my teeth chattering violently as the entity began to intentionally drop my body temperature from the inside out, trying to freeze my heart before I could reach Miller's terminal. I waded deeper into the claustrophobic vault, in the distance, casting a sickly, flickering green glow over the oily surface of the water sat Terminal 4. The agent industrial computer was half entangled in the fleshy vines, its monochrome screen struggling to stay powered. Suddenly, the black water around me began to churn into a violent foam. The concrete walls exploded inward. Dozens of pale-eyed covered tentacles, smaller but faster than the massive limb upstairs, tore through the drywall, spray-painting the sludge with dust and debris. Before I could take another step, a thick, muscular tentacle erupted from the water directly beneath me. It wrapped around my waist with a crushing force, lifting me completely out of the flooded pool. The knuckles on its fleshy surface uncoiled, splitting open like sores to reveal hundreds of milky, unblinking pupils. They all swiveled in unison, locking onto my face. The tentacle squeezed, fracturing my ribs, forcing the remaining air from my lungs as it began to drag me backward, pulling me toward the central, pulsing biomass where the original steel skeleton of the ride met the raw earth. My vision began to blur at the edges. The entity was flooding my brain with a final, overwhelming directive, attempting to completely erase my identity and fold my memories into the collective choir. I could feel my fingers losing their grip, my conscious mind slipping away into the black water. With the absolute last ounce of my human autonomy, I forced my left arm to move. I didn't reach for the terminal keyboard, I couldn't reach it. Instead, I lunged outward, my fingers clawing at the heavy, rusted iron pipe sticking out from an old maintenance rack on the freezing wall. I didn't swing at the tentacle crushing my chest. I gripped the pipe with both hands, using my entire body weight to pull myself forward, and smashed it directly into the high-pressure overhead brass valve marked Liquid Nitrogen, Cryogenic Core Override. The brass valve sheared completely off its threads with a deafening metallic crack. For a fraction of a second, there was a tense, pressurized silence. Then the overhead cryogenic line blew wide open. A sound like a localized sonic boom echoed through the concrete vault as high-pressure liquid nitrogen erupted in Sub-Basement 3. A violent roaring cloud of dense, white freezing vapor poured from the ruptured pipe, instantly dropping the temperature in the room to a lethal sub-zero. The effects were instantaneous. The black water beneath me didn't just freeze, it expanded and hardened with a terrifying, rapid crackle, turning into a solid, jagged floor of ice that shattered the rusted pipes running along the ground. The massive tentacle wrapped around my waist stiffened instantly. The fleshy knuckles froze mid-pulse, and the hundreds of weeping milky eyes glazed over, turning a cloudy, crystalline gray as the flash freeze took hold. The agonizing, roaring choir inside my skull fractured. The overlapping voices of Miller, the coordinators, and the missing text began to distort, dissolving into sharp bursts of digital static, like a scratched vinyl record spinning out of control, before exploding into a profound, echoing silence. Because the entity was deeply wired into my central nervous system, I felt the freeze creeping into my own body. The white parasitic fibers threaded through my skin, my muscles, and my jaw began to wither and die, shattering like glass inside my flesh. The frozen tentacle holding me became so brittle that it snapped under its own weight, with a sound like breaking porcelain. I fell hard onto the new floor of solid ice, gasping for breath as a dense, freezing fog swirled around me. All around the vault, the pulsing veins on the walls cracked, peeled away from the concrete, and dissolved into brittle black dust. The network was dead. The contract was broken. The next morning, the Florida sun rose over the Magic Kingdom, bright, blinding, and oblivious. The Little Mermaid attraction remained completely dark, blocked off by heavy themed construction walls. Officially, corporate communications released a statement blaming an unexpected major coolant leak and structural failure in the lower mechanical bays. For 3 weeks, external teams were wearing unmarked hazmat gear, hauled heavy frozen crates of calcified industrial insulation out of the back exits of the park in the dead of the night. I'm still employed by the company. I requested an immediate transfer, and now I work in an outdoor attraction in Adventureland, spending my days out in the baking, beautiful, wonderful heat. My neck doesn't hitch anymore when I turn to look at the guests. My smile is completely my own, fueled by the actual relief rather than a parasitic reflex. And when I look at my own shadow cast long on the hot pavement, it only ever has 2 arms. But sometimes when the park gets quiet before closing and the crowds thin out, I find myself looking across the lagoon toward the purple spires of the grotto. The ride is just plastic, steel, and hollow fiberglass again. The villain in the center is just an empty machine waiting for a programming script that will never come back. But I still never look beneath the seats of the clamshells when they cycle past, because I know that no matter how much concrete they pour over it, beneath the happiest place on earth, the bones are still cold.